At her husband's funeral, her son leaned in and whispered, "One down." Evelyn Hartman didn't flinch. She memorized the moment. By spring, Brandon would be erased from the deed, the accounts, and the legacy he schemed to inherit. She'd spent decades building trust. Now she was dismantling him, line by line, clause by clause. No shouting, no scandal, just notarized silence. And when he finally fought back, the trust was already filed, and so was his defeat. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The wind didn't howl. It sighed, low, steady, and indifferent, like it had buried 100 husbands before Richard Hartman and would bury 100 more. Evelyn stood still, a figure carved in granite beneath her black wool coat, her gloved hands folded neatly in front of her. The preacher's voice trembled slightly as he quoted Ecclesiastes, but hers didn't. She said nothing. Her eyes didn't water. Not here. Not in front of them. Around her, faces came and went like passengers in a station. Nieces Evelyn hadn't seen since they had braces, Richard's golf friends pretending they hadn't drifted years ago. Layla, her daughter-in-law, dabbed her eyes theatrically, mascara blooming into spider legs. Brandon stood beside her, too tall, too polished, hands buried deep in the pockets of his camel coat, like this was just another brisk Monday morning. The preacher closed his book. The ground crew stepped forward. A hush swept across the group as the first shovel of earth dropped with a soft thud against the casket lid. And then Brandon leaned in, too close. "One down," he muttered, his voice a breath of ice against Evelyn's ear. "One expensive one left." Evelyn didn't flinch, not visibly, but her stomach twisted like she'd swallowed broken glass. She turned slightly, studying her son. He was already looking away, watching Layla fiddle with her phone. His tone hadn't been joking, nor mournful. It had been casual, calculated, like he was already tallying the estate in his head. Evelyn inhaled slowly through her nose. Her gloved hand tightened around the handle of her handbag. The leather creaked, but no one noticed. A gust stirred the petals atop the casket spray. A few floated free, white lilies, drifting toward the grass like tiny surrender flags. Not yet, she told herself, not here. As the final prayers were spoken, Evelyn stepped forward and placed a single white rose on the polished cherry wood. Her movements were composed, deliberate. Not one petal shook. But behind her eyes, something ancient and volcanic stirred. Not grief, but something colder, more precise. The car ride back to the house was silent, save for the muffled hum of tires and the occasional whisper of turn signals. Brandon drove. Layla scrolled through Instagram. Evelyn sat in the back seat, her purse on her lap. She slowly unzipped it and reached inside, her fingers searching blindly until they closed around something cold and slim. A silver pen, elegantly aged, its cap slightly worn where her thumb always rested. She remembered the day Richard had given it to her, their 25th anniversary. He'd placed it in a velvet box with a note. For every chapter we write together, they'd used it to sign the mortgage, the trust, the living will, every milestone. Now her thumb traced its barrel like a ritual. She looked up, meeting her own eyes in the rearview mirror. Brandon didn't notice. He was checking the time. Layla was laughing at something on her screen. Evelyn gripped the pen tighter. She imagined signing a single line, not for love, not for legacy, but for consequence. The future they thought they had? She would edit that. The car turned into her driveway. The lawn looked the same. The shutters could use paint. But something had changed. Evelyn stepped out slowly. The air had cooled. Her knees ached, but her spine remained straight. Brandon and Layla walked ahead without waiting. She lingered at the door, her fingers closing around the pen one last time before slipping it back into her coat pocket. Inside, voices began again. Layla asking about takeout, Brandon mentioning paperwork. Evelyn moved toward the kitchen but paused at the hallway mirror. She stared at her reflection. Her eyes were dry. Her hands were steady. And her voice, when it came, was a whisper no one else heard. One down. She opened the drawer where the old documents were kept, pulled out a yellowing folder, and reached for the pen again, this time not for memory, but for war. The folder sat like a corpse on the dining room table, wide, yellowed, bulging with a decade of paperwork and the slow erosion of trust. Evelyn placed her reading glasses on the bridge of her nose and turned on the lamp. The house was quiet now. Brandon and Layla had gone, their absence as sterile as their presence had been. No hug, no good night, just the sound of their car rolling down the drive like a retreating tank. She sat, spine straight, fingers interlaced for a moment as she looked down at the cover. "Important Family Docs," written in Richard's blocky all-caps from years ago. Her heart pinched, but only briefly. She couldn't afford to get sentimental now. She opened the folder. The first few pages were familiar. The original will from 20 years ago, lovingly crafted, full of mutual language. We, Richard and Evelyn Hartman, in sound mind and judgment, everything equal, everything careful. Their names stitched into each clause like a promise. Then came the new documents. Brandon's revisions, the ones he'd insisted on last summer after Richard's second heart scare. He had arrived with pre-filled forms, legal jargon, and a smirk of efficiency. "Just simplifying," he'd said, "modernizing. You two deserve peace of mind." Evelyn hadn't liked it then, but Richard had been tired, and Brandon had talked fast. The lawyer they'd used for decades had already retired. "This is the grown-up thing to do," Brandon had said. Now her eyes scanned the lines like a hunter, marking the shift in tone. Her name was still present, but diluted. Brandon's name, however, appeared again and again. Executor, power of attorney, primary beneficiary, sole authority on real estate distribution. A clause near the bottom caught her eye. Upon the death of the surviving spouse, all assets not previously disbursed shall transfer to Brandon Hartman without contest. Without contest. Her jaw tightened. She set the page aside with surgical precision. She reached for a clean pad of paper and began a list in her own cursive. House, no mortgage. Richard's life insurance, $250,000. My pension joint trust, revised, 2023. Jewelry and safe deposit access vehicle savings, Bank of Oak County. Beside each, she wrote one word in capital letters. Reclaim. The pen didn't shake in her grip. She stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled a small leather address book from behind a row of dusty cookbooks. Flipping past names of friends long gone or long moved away, she landed on a familiar one. Myers, Dana, Law Office of Dana Myers, Esquire. Dana had once been Evelyn's student, a quiet girl with a sharp tongue and a stubborn sense of right and wrong. Now she was a seasoned estate attorney who still sent Christmas cards and always answered Evelyn's emails within the hour. Evelyn tapped the number into the landline. The phone rang twice. Dana Myers. "It's Evelyn Hartman." A pause. "Mrs. Hartman, I heard about Richard. I'm so sorry." "Thank you," Evelyn said, her voice even. "I need to meet. Tomorrow if you can." There was a click of keyboard keys. "Absolutely. 10 a.m.? That works. And Dana?" Evelyn paused. "Discretion matters. I want this quiet." "You've got it. I'll clear the schedule." Evelyn hung up and sat back down at the table. She folded the revised will with slow surgical precision and slid it back into the folder. Not because it mattered anymore, but because she intended to replace every lie with a legal truth. The silence of the room was not empty. It was potent, like the breath held before a thunderstorm. From the other room, the grandfather clock chimed once. Midnight. She stood and walked to the hallway where Richard's portrait still hung. He was younger in it, hair dark, smile full of mischief. She touched the frame lightly. "They thought I was tired," she said quietly. "They thought wrong." The folder tucked under her arm, she turned toward the study and flicked on the light. Behind her, in the faint reflection of the hallway mirror, her silhouette looked unfamiliar. Straight, leaner. Like the weight she carried had shifted from sorrow to steel. Dana's office smelled faintly of peppermint tea and old paper. Warm, familiar, and private. The walls were lined with books Evelyn had once taught. To Kill a Mockingbird, The Crucible, Death of a Salesman. Justice and delusion lived side by side here. It felt fitting. Dana Myers stood behind her desk, blazer draped neatly over the back of her chair, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. She had the sharp eyes of someone who read between the lines as easily as breathing. Evelyn slid the folder across the desk without a word. Dana opened it slowly, adjusting her reading glasses. She flipped through the revised documents with care, only blinking when she reached the bottom of the will. "Is this Brandon's handwriting?" she asked, tapping the marginal note scrawled in tight blue ink. Evelyn nodded. "It wasn't there last year." I checked. Dana frowned. "Advance liquidation of assets permissible without consent of secondary party? That's not legal, not without explicit notarization." "I thought as much." Dana looked up. "And what do you want to do about all of this?" Evelyn didn't blink. "Burn it, bury it, rewrite everything, quietly." A silence settled between them. Dana folded her hands. "You understand the storm this will create." "I'm not worried about the storm," Evelyn said. "I'm the storm." Dana's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "All right then." They worked for nearly 2 hours without interruption. Evelyn, despite her age, tracked every line, every clause, every possible loophole Brandon might use. Her pen moved like a scalpel, slicing out language that reeked of manipulation. Together, they drafted a new, irrevocable trust, one that couldn't be contested without a full court hearing and extensive medical evidence of Evelyn's incompetence, which Dana made clear would never hold up. Evelyn chose the name carefully. The Quiet Garden. "Richard's favorite place?" Dana asked. "He planted every rose himself," Evelyn replied. "Every single one, even in the snow." Dana leaned back in her chair. "So who does the trust benefit?" "Not Brandon." Evelyn passed her a handwritten list. Dana scanned it silently. Hartman Hospice Workers Fund, Community College Scholarships, English and Nursing Majors, Local Library Foundation, Widow Housing Relief Grant, Animal Rescue Center, Richard loved mutts. "And the remainder?" Dana asked. "Distributed across the programs proportionally. I want it alive, not hoarded." Dana nodded. "You'll need to change your power of attorney, asset access, safe deposit, everything." "I already started a checklist." Dana smiled this time, genuinely. "You were always the sharp one." "I taught Macbeth to teenagers in June. I know how to survive an ambush." Dana began entering the amendments into her case management system, then paused. "You understand. When Brandon finds out, he's going to come hard. Legal challenges, maybe even guardianship petitions." Evelyn's expression didn't flicker. "He's been playing chess with a ghost. He forgot I'm still on the board." Dana clicked a few keys. "We'll seal everything. Digital copies only. Originals go in my fireproof case." "Perfect." As Dana moved to print the draft trust, Evelyn looked out the window behind her. A robin pecked at a patch of grass, persistent despite the wind. Her thoughts drifted to Richard, to his worn garden gloves, the soft curses he'd mutter when a squirrel ruined his dahlias, the way he hummed Sinatra when he pruned the hydrangeas. She wasn't grieving anymore. She was repotting the soil, reseeding her legacy. Dana returned with a crisp folder and the first printed copy of the Quiet Garden Trust. "All that's left is your signature." Evelyn uncapped the silver pen. She signed it slowly, deliberately, with the same pen she and Richard had once used to build everything Brandon thought he could steal. Dana gathered the pages. "I'll file it with the state and notify the asset holders." Quietly. "Good." They stood. Dana opened the door. "Keep your phone on." "I will." Evelyn stepped out into the sun. The chill was fading, finally. She reached her car, opened the door, and sat for a moment before starting the ignition. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One voicemail. She played it. Brandon's voice. Breezy. Too breezy. "Hey, Mom. Just checking in. Wanted to talk about consolidating some of Dad's accounts. Simplify things. Call me back when you're up for it." Evelyn didn't smile. She deleted the message. The knock came just past 10 a.m. Sharp, impatient, and familiar. Evelyn paused mid-slice at the kitchen counter, the knife halfway through a Honeycrisp. She wasn't expecting anyone. not today. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, walked slowly to the door, and opened it. Brandon stood there in a pressed navy blazer, his smile far too bright for a grieving son. Layla was beside him in a high-collared trench and oversized sunglasses, as if headed to brunch, not her mother-in-law's living room. "Morning, Mom," Brandon said, brushing past her before she could respond. Layla followed, slipping off her heels by the rug like she owned the place. "I would have appreciated a call," Evelyn said quietly, closing the door behind them. "We didn't want to bother you," Layla chirped, her tone sugar-coated and soulless. "We just figured you could use some company, and Brandon's been helping with a lot of transitions lately. Right, babe?" Brandon gave a modest shrug, already moving toward the dining table, the same one where he'd once built Lego castles and demanded grilled cheese with the crusts cut off. Now he set down a leather folder like it was a briefcase full of mercy. "I've been thinking about the house," he said. Evelyn tilted her head. "What about it?" "Well," he began, sliding into a seat uninvited, "it's a lot to manage. Taxes, maintenance, insurance. It's really best to get ahead of these things. Simplify. Avoid probate. Just make it clean." Layla chimed in from the kitchen, where she was already snooping through the cabinets. "You know how these old properties can get? Leaks? Moldavian carbon monoxide? God forbid." Evelyn blinked, slow and steady. "You're concerned about carbon monoxide?" Brandon laughed like she was a slow student catching up. "We're just trying to help, Mom. Layla found a great quitclaim deed template. I can fill it out and have it notarized today. You'd still live here, of course. For as long as you want." Evelyn kept her face blank. "And then what?" "Well," Brandon said, voice smooth as lacquer, "technically, I'd own the property. Makes things seamless if anything happens. Better tax implications, too. Just a formality, really." Evelyn moved to the kitchen slowly. "I'll make tea." Layla looked amused. "Oolong if you have it," she said, then winked. "I know how forgetful things can get at your age." Evelyn smiled tightly. "Right. Senior moments?" She opened a drawer and discreetly tapped her phone's voice recorder app before setting it face down beside the kettle. The whistle began to build as she poured the water. "So what's the rush?" Evelyn asked, carrying the tray back. "Your father's funeral was 3 days ago." Brandon exhaled heavily. "I'm trying to spare you the stress. We could even put utilities in my name. You wouldn't have to think about a thing." Evelyn poured the tea with steady hands. "Sounds convenient." "For everyone," Layla added, crossing her legs. "You get peace of mind. Brandon handles the messy stuff. Win-win." He leaned forward, voice low. "Honestly, Mom, I don't think you're fully grasping how complicated this can get. There are certain things that aren't in your wheelhouse anymore." Evelyn looked at him over the rim of her teacup. "Such as?" "Title transfers. Asset allocation. Legalese. It's not your strong suit. And Layla and I are in a better place to handle long-term strategy. You taught English, not tax law." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. Evelyn let it hang, let it breathe. Then she reached forward and gently tapped the phone beside the kettle. The screen lit up, still recording. Brandon's jaw tensed. "Oops," she said softly. "Senior moment." Layla blinked. "Wait, were you recording us?" "No, dear," Evelyn said. "I was recording me, practicing my pronunciation, for memoir readings." Brandon stood abruptly, scoffing. "You're being paranoid." Evelyn looked him in the eye. "And you're being recorded, but please don't let me interrupt your simplification." The leather folder sat untouched on the table. Brandon hesitated, then scooped it back up like a magician retrieving a failed trick. "We'll come back when you're thinking more clearly," he muttered. Layla, suddenly uncomfortable, followed him out without putting her heels back on. The door shut with a soft thud. Evelyn stood alone in the kitchen, the tea cooling untouched. She walked to the phone and ended the recording. Saved. Backed up to the cloud. She took a sip, then smiled into the silence. The county clerk's office smelled like mildew and toner ink, a place where paper outlived people. Evelyn stood at the counter, papers in hand, coat buttoned to the collar. Her silver pen sat in her purse, but she wouldn't need it now. The signatures were already dry. Witnessed, notarized, stamped with the full weight of the state of Missouri. The clerk, a young woman with chipped navy polish and earbuds in one ear, glanced over the trust packet, then the updated will. "Everything looks good," she said, smacking her gum. "You're sure you want it sealed as irrevocable?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "That's the whole point, dear." The clerk nodded, stapled 3 forms together, and fed the entire bundle into a gray machine with a groan and hiss. Filed, stamped, permanent. As she stepped back into the brisk air, Evelyn didn't feel triumph, not yet. Just an absence of weight, like her lungs had made space for something colder than oxygen. By noon, she sat in a quiet corner booth at Bank of Oak County, sipping stale coffee from a paper cup while her new financial advisor printed updated documents. Her old one, the man Brandon had recommended last year, had been polite, but too eager to loop her son in on every transaction. Dana had warned her, "Control isn't just about the will. It's every lever that moves your money." So Evelyn pulled each lever, carefully. Power of attorney, revoked. Beneficiary access, revoked. Joint accounts, converted or closed. PINs and passwords, reset. Twice. By 2:15, Brandon no longer had access to a single penny with her name on it. The house was next. Dana met her on the porch with a red manila envelope and a windblown smile. "Ready?" she asked. Evelyn nodded, unlocking the door. The 2 women stepped inside, where Richard's walking stick still hung by the coat rack, and the living room smelled faintly of cedar oil and thyme. They spread the paperwork across the coffee table. Dana pointed with a lacquered fingernail. "This makes the house a life estate. You retain all rights until death or voluntary transfer. It can't be sold or leveraged without your approval. Once you pass, ownership will default to the nonprofit tied to the Quiet Garden Fund." "Not Brandon," Evelyn signed with her silver pen, the ink gliding smoothly over the parchment-like paper. Her hand didn't tremble. "Not a bad day's work," Dana said, stacking everything neatly. "You've officially carved him out." Evelyn glanced toward the window, where sunlight slashed through the blinds like gold blades. "Number I've officially begun." That night, she waited until the sky turned the color of an old bruise, violet and blue with the last sliver of gold on the horizon. She opened her messages. There were 3 from Brandon. "Brandon, just following up, did you look over the quitclaim draft I sent? Want me to walk you through it? Don't stress, we'll figure it out together. Just want to keep things clean?" Evelyn typed slowly, then deleted, then typed again. Evelyn, "Hi, sweetheart. Still trying to find my printer? Where did you say the paper was? So many buttons on this thing. Hope you're both eating. XO." She hit send and sat back. Less than a minute later, his reply came. A thumbs-up emoji followed by, "No worries. Let me know if you need help with anything." She stared at that smiley face until it blurred into a smudge of pure gall. Then she opened a new folder on her laptop, labeled it Quiet Garden, legal confirmed, dragged copies of the trust, the deed, and the bank transfers into it. She made 3 backups, one on an encrypted flash drive, one emailed to Dana, one printed and locked in the fireproof box. The next morning, the doorbell rang. Dana stood there again, but this time she held a USPS envelope, thick, white, and stamped certified mail. Evelyn took it and opened it slowly. Inside, the full set of Brandon's routine legal updates, printed on his consulting firm's letterhead. The irony was almost artful. At the bottom, a sticky note in Brandon's neat handwriting. "Thought I'd help you get ahead of things before it gets messy. Love you, B." Evelyn set the envelope down and walked to the kitchen. She opened the cupboard, took down the tin where Richard had hidden emergency cash during the recession. Inside now, flash drives, copies, insurance. The burner phone Dana gave her, just in case. She added one more item, the sticky note. The roast chicken sat in the center of the dining table, steaming gently under the low amber glow of the chandelier. Evelyn had taken her time. Lemon zest, fresh thyme, a dash of cayenne Richard used to sneak in when no one was looking. The smell filled the house like muscle memory. At 6:02 p.m., the doorbell rang. Evelyn wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door to Brandon and Layla, both wearing strained smiles and tailored coats too light for the weather. "Smells great in here," Brandon said, stepping in like he'd been invited. "We didn't want you eating alone," Layla added, her tone sugared, just shy of condescending. "And I brought a new supplement for your joints. You said they were acting up?" Evelyn's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Did I?" They walked into the dining room, where the table was already set. Linen napkins, real silver, 3 wine glasses gleaming. Brandon gave an approving nod as if inspecting a client's staging effort. Layla took the seat closest to the head without asking. Evelyn poured the wine, a light red Richard had favored, and filled their glasses to just below full. Brandon immediately picked his up. Layla sniffed hers and set it down untouched. "So," Brandon said after a sip, "we've been talking." "About you. Out of love, of course." Evelyn set down the serving spoon, slow and deliberate. "Naturally. You've been managing so much since Dad passed," Layla said, clasping her hands over her salad fork. "It's a lot for someone alone." Brandon continued, "There's this beautiful assisted living place in St. Louis. Open floor plans, wellness spa, memory care on-site if needed." Layla smiled. "And medication management. I could even help set up your pill organizer until the staff gets used to your schedule." Evelyn let that hang in the air. She reached for her wine, took a long sip, and then, without a word, rose from her chair. She walked to the china cabinet, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a white envelope, thick with embossed paper. She returned to the table and placed it gently beside Brandon's plate. "What's this?" he asked, already reaching for it. "An answer," Evelyn said. He slid the trust out and began to read. The color drained from his face with the slow precision of melting ice. Layla leaned over his shoulder. "Wait, what is the Quiet Garden Trust? What is this?" "Legally filed," Evelyn said, her voice like pressed velvet. "Irrevocable, witnessed, notarized. Every penny accounted for, every clause airtight." Brandon's hands tightened around the paper. This isn't valid. We'll contest it." Evelyn met his eyes. "You won't." He laughed once, short and high. "You think some small-town lawyer and a paper trail can stop me? You can't be serious." Evelyn tilted her head. "Let me be clear, darling. I'm old, not obsolete." Layla shifted in her seat, something cracking behind her gaze. "You didn't even tell us. This is insane. You need to talk to someone neutral. A doctor, maybe." Evelyn stood again, this time slower. She reached into her cardigan pocket and placed her phone on the table. Screen up. The voice memo titled, "House Visit February." 3 inches glowed softly. Brandon froze. Evelyn leaned in just enough to twist the knife. "You're used to me forgetting things, Brandon, but I remember everything you said in this house." Brandon shoved his chair back, scraping wood against wood. "This is pathetic." "You know what's pathetic?" Evelyn replied, her tone steady. "A man trying to steal a house from his mother and calling it simplification." Layla opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at Evelyn like she was seeing her for the first time, and didn't like what she saw. Brandon stormed toward the front door, but not before snapping, "You'll regret this." "I already did," Evelyn said calmly, "for 38 years. The door slammed behind them. She sat down alone, poured another half-glass of wine, and speared a piece of roast chicken onto her plate. The silence that followed was not peace. It was strategy. The bank lobby was warm and hushed, a quiet hum of printers and polite financial panic. Evelyn sat across from the associate, a young man in a navy vest with a buzz cut and a name tag that read Kyle S., who had clearly expected to be walking an elderly woman through a password reset, not witnessing a strategic withdrawal. "I'd like to close these accounts," she said calmly, sliding over a printed list. "The ones still in joint designation with my son. Consolidate them under my name only, or liquidate if there's no interest penalty." Kyle blinked. Are you sure, ma'am? We'd typically recommend speaking with the co-holder." "I am the original holder. He was added at my request. I'm removing him at mine." She smiled gently, like a grandmother offering advice on pie crust. Kyle nodded, gulped, and started typing. Within 30 minutes, 2 savings accounts, a municipal bond fund, and 1 neglected CD had been shifted into Evelyn's sole ownership. Another had been closed entirely. The check issued directly to her. She tucked it into her handbag without ceremony. That afternoon, she drove to the public library, the one Richard had championed back when they still had community council meetings that mattered. The head librarian, June, met her at the front desk, still in the same cat-eye glasses she'd worn since 1992. "Evelyn," she whispered, "we heard about Richard. I'm so sorry." Evelyn nodded, setting a cream envelope on the counter. "He always said he wanted to die with a book in his lap. This makes sure a few more get into others' hands." June opened the envelope and gasped softly. This is $5,000. Put it toward the poetry section. And maybe a new coffee machine for the staff room. He hated the decaf." They both laughed for a breath, and then June hugged her, unexpectedly tight. Evelyn allowed it. Just this once. As she left, the building seemed somehow sturdier, as if money, when placed with meaning, could give even bricks and mortar a spine. Next stop, the safe deposit vault at Bank of Oak County. "Access change form?" the clerk asked. Evelyn passed it over, already signed. "I'll need to see the previous co-signer's ID or a notarized revocation." "I brought both," Evelyn said, handing over Brandon's original authorization and a notarized letter from Dana dissolving his access under new legal designations. The clerk frowned. "Is this part of an estate dispute?" "No, dear," Evelyn replied. "It's part of an estate correction." That night, she sliced an apple in silence, watching the clock tick past 9. Then her phone buzzed. Dana's name. She answered. "Guess who filed a motion this afternoon?" Dana said. "Brandon retained an attorney. Claims the trust was executed under duress. Wants an emergency injunction." Evelyn rolled the apple slice between her fingers like a coin. "Is the injunction granted?" "Denied. Judge said the paperwork was clean and the timeline was too tidy to suggest coercion. You're officially not incompetent. Congratulations." Evelyn let out the smallest breath of satisfaction. "Let's send them a thank you fruit basket. No pears." Dana snorted. "Already ahead of you. Oh, and you'll love this. I just got an alert from my niece. Layla's been venting on Twitter." "Send it over." Moments later, a screenshot arrived in Evelyn's inbox. "Layla, CEO wife. Nothing worse than entitled boomers with too much time, too many cats, and a god complex. I earned this, LOL okay?" Evelyn smirked and tapped forward. To Dana, subject line, entitled, defined. Then she opened her notes app and added a line under her running checklist. Monitor Layla's PR footprint. Consider libel. She closed the app, sat back in her chair, and stared at the ceiling. She wasn't angry. She was patient. And patience, she'd learned, was the art of watching someone build their own gallows. The courtroom smelled of lemon disinfectant and overused HVAC, sterile, controlled, like someone had tried to scrub the emotion out of the room. Evelyn sat upright in her dark blue suit, a strand of pearls resting calmly at her throat. No makeup beyond powder and lip balm. She didn't need dramatics. She had facts. To her left sat Dana, calm and unreadable in a charcoal skirt suit and tortoiseshell glasses. Her legal pad was crisp, untouched. Across the aisle, Brandon sat flanked by his attorney, a younger man in a tailored three-piece and slicked back hair. Brandon wore a forced solemnity, but his foot tapped nervously beneath the table. Layla wasn't with him. The clerk called the case. Hartman versus Hartman. Petition to appoint guardian on grounds of cognitive incapacity. The judge, a woman in her 60s with cropped silver hair and the posture of someone who didn't tolerate nonsense, looked down over her readers. "Counsel, your motion?" Brandon's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we are concerned about Mrs. Hartman's recent legal actions. The rapid restructuring of her estate, closure of joint accounts, and revocation of long-standing financial authority suggest diminished capacity. My client, her son, simply wants to ensure she's protected." Evelyn didn't flinch. Dana stood. Your Honor, we have documented proof that every change made was within her legal right, properly filed, witnessed, and notarized. What's being challenged is not her mind, it's her autonomy. The judge turned to Evelyn. Mrs. Hartman, do you wish to speak for yourself? Evelyn rose slowly but with no hesitation. Your Honor, she began, voice clear, I taught American literature for 38 years. I've read more court cases in Faulkner and Fitzgerald than most undergrads in law school, but this isn't fiction, this is my life, and my life has been under quiet siege by the person I raised. Brandon's face twitched. Evelyn opened her handbag, pulled out her phone, and tapped the voice memo labeled, House Visit, February 3. The court speaker system echoed with Brandon's voice, oily, coaxing. You're not really up to date on title law anymore, are you? We could simplify everything. No need to get confused. Just sign. It'll make things easier. Then came Layla's syrupy tone. You know how forgetful things get at your age. Evelyn tapped to stop the recording. The room was silent. Even the stenographer looked up. Then Evelyn opened a folder and lifted a single sheet of paper, her hand steady. This was written by my late husband, Richard Hartman, 6 months before his death. She read, If something happens to me, let it be known that Evelyn remains of sound mind, better judgment, and stronger moral footing than anyone I've ever known. If anyone questions that, it is not her they doubt, it is their own character they reveal. Dana gently took the statement and passed it to the judge. Brandon looked like he'd swallowed a coin. The judge didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then, petition denied. The court finds no grounds for incompetency. Mrs. Hartman is of sound mind and acted well within her legal rights. This matter is closed. Dana allowed herself the smallest nod. Evelyn remained standing, hands folded in front of her, expression unreadable. Brandon stood, clenching his jaw. This isn't over. Evelyn tilted her head, eyes locked on his. No, Brandon, it's just not under your control anymore. He stormed out, his lawyer scrambling behind. The judge gave Evelyn a long, unreadable look. You handled yourself well. I've had practice, she said, voice low, living in a house full of men who mistook silence for weakness. She stepped down from the stand. The courtroom air tasted different now. Not victory exactly, but clarity. The land wasn't much to look at yet, just 2 quiet acres off Route 18, ringed by oaks and scattered with gravel and flattened weeds. But Evelyn stood at the edge of the property with her coat buttoned to the collar and her heart strangely light. A wooden stake poked out of the frozen ground, tied with a blue ribbon. This is it, Dana said beside her. The Quiet Garden Education Fund officially owns it. Evelyn nodded. He'd have liked this. Richard always said land was memory that hadn't happened yet. Dana handed her a leather folio. Inside, a single-page release form for the first $80,000 installment, enough to launch 3 full scholarships, build the base of the memorial library, and seed a fund that would outlive them both. Evelyn signed with the silver pen, the ink flowing like water. 2 days later, the story hit the local paper. Headline, Retired Teacher Funds Dream Garden, Legacy Scholarships for First-Gen Students. It ran with a photo of Evelyn, standing in front of the property, smiling faintly, the scarf Richard had once bought her tucked tight around her neck. The article detailed her donation, the name of the fund, and her desire to leave something useful behind, not just money, but roots. It was picked up by the regional radio station by noon. By 3 p.m., Brandon had seen it. The voicemail came in breathless and distorted. You went to the press? Really? You gave away $80,000 for dirt and a vanity headline? Do you even know what you've done? Call me. Now, Evelyn saved it. Then she blocked his number for the week. At 6:47 p.m., Layla posted a new selfie on Instagram, eyes puffy, captioned, Sometimes you have to step away from toxic environments, even if they're blood-related. Chaka healing mode, Chaka chosen family. Evelyn raised an eyebrow at the phrase, blood-related, then forwarded it to Dana with a simple subject line, fragile optics. Within the hour, Dana replied, She moved out, didn't she? Evelyn typed, apparently to her sisters in Kansas City. Brandon's rattling alone now. It won't be long. That night, Evelyn sat at the kitchen table with a stack of thick cardstock and a fountain pen. The air smelled of cinnamon tea and distant rain. She began writing thank you cards. One to the hospice nurse who stayed an hour past her shift on Richard's last night. One to the janitor who had snuck in her favorite sugar-free chocolates. One to the administrator who'd let her bring in a record player, despite the rules. Each card was addressed with care and sealed by hand. This part wasn't vengeance. This was memory work. By morning, the Quiet Garden website was live. Dana's niece had helped set it up. Clean layout, warm photos. The mission stated simply, to fund education and dignity for the quietly courageous. There was a contact page, and a tab labeled Future Projects, a soft hint that Evelyn wasn't done. Later that week, Dana called. "Local college wants to meet," she said. "They're talking about naming the scholarship in your honor." Evelyn shook her head. "Number, call it Richard's Quiet Garden Fund." "That's enough." A pause. Then Dana's voice softened. "You okay?" "I'm rested," Evelyn said. "First time in a while." She looked out the window at the small planter box by the kitchen. New growth was poking through, green shoots pushing past dead soil. The knock this time wasn't loud. Just 3 soft raps, hesitant, as if the person on the other side already knew he didn't belong there. Evelyn opened the door slowly. Brandon stood on the porch, hands in the pockets of a wrinkled coat, eyes red-rimmed and underslept. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her with a boy's desperation packed into a grown man's body. "I'm not here to fight," he said. Evelyn stepped aside without a word. He walked in slowly, like someone stepping into a church after decades of silence. She gestured toward the kitchen table but didn't sit. Brandon did, pulling out the same chair he always had since high school, like his body remembered the house even if his conscience didn't. "I've been thinking," he said, staring down at the grain of the wood, "about everything. The funeral, Layla leaving, the money stuff. I handled things badly." Evelyn leaned against the counter. "Yes, you did." He flinched, then forced a hollow chuckle. "You know how grief messes with people, right? I wasn't thinking straight. That comment at the funeral, God, it was a joke. A bad one. I was stressed. Number trying to keep it together." He looked up, eyes glassy. "Layla said I was cold, that I manipulated things. But I swear, Mom, I was just trying to manage it all." Evelyn crossed her arms. "Manage. That's what you always called it. When you gaslit your father, when you rewrote the will, when you tried to bleed me dry in the name of structure." Brandon opened his mouth, but she cut him off with just a look. Sharp, quiet, final. He deflated. "She left me, you know, moved out, says she doesn't recognize me anymore." Evelyn's voice was low. "She finally saw you." He swallowed hard, blinking too fast. "I don't have anyone left. I messed it up." Silence thickened between them. Brandon glanced around the kitchen. The same clock ticking above the stove, the same chipped sugar bowl. But something in the air had changed. It wasn't just time, it was authority. He no longer had any. His voice cracked. "I'm not asking for everything, just the house." Evelyn stared at him. "You want the house." "Just the house. You could still live here, obviously. I'd never force you out, but it would mean something to have something. It's family, history he was reaching, not just for property but for dignity he'd long since forfeited." Evelyn turned. She walked to the drawer beneath the microwave, the one that had held everything from Richard's spare glasses to old tax forms and emergency batteries. She pulled it open. Brandon sat up straighter. Evelyn reached in and retrieved a cream-colored file folder. She returned to the table, set it down slowly in front of him, then slid into the chair across. He stared at the label, HOUSE, Life Estate. "I signed this 2 weeks ago," she said, folding her hands. "It's legally binding, filed, recorded, and irrevocable. I retain full rights until I die. After that, it passes directly to the Quiet Garden Fund." Brandon's hands hovered over the folder like he wanted to open it, but knew better. "No appeal?" he asked, voice barely audible. "There's always appeal," Evelyn said, "but this time it would be in the form of trespassing charges." He blinked. "You'd do that?" Evelyn didn't blink. You taught me how? He looked down at the folder again, then stood slowly. I came here to ask, to be honest. I know, she said. He turned to go, then paused at the door. I was your son, he said. Still am. Evelyn stood, walked to the door, opened it for him. You were, she said softly. You chose to become something else. The listing never went public. Evelyn called a name scribbled on the back of a business card tucked inside Richard's old wallet. Derek Trujillo, Private Real Estate Solutions. We buy peace of mind. It had been handed to them years ago, after a town hall meeting about rising property taxes. Richard had kept it just in case. Evelyn smiled at the irony. Derek answered on the first ring. Mrs. Hartman, absolutely. We handle discrete transactions all the time. Cash offers, full inspection waiver. 2-week close is doable if you've got your documents ready. I do, she said. I want clean papers, no back and forth, and no market testing. You buy it, you hold it. I disappear. There was a pause. Then, Ma'am, I think we're going to get along just fine. By the end of the week, Dana sat across from her with a checklist in one hand and a cappuccino in the other. You're sure about this? She asked. Evelyn was folding old dish towels into a donation box. There's nothing left for me here but echoes. I'm done dusting ghosts. Dana nodded. The condo's confirmed. Lakeside unit, 2nd floor, 2 bedrooms. They'll let you paint the walls anything but red. I'm thinking blue, Evelyn said, sealing the box with a smooth swipe of packing tape. Lake-colored. Brandon received the notice via certified mail. Eviction notice, 30 days, property transfer. Finalized owner, Derek Trujillo Holdings, LLC. Dana had insisted on filing it through the proper legal channels, even though Evelyn had already taken herself off the deed months prior. You want a clean perimeter, she'd said. Don't give him room to claim harassment. Let the courts handle the screaming. He called. She didn't answer. Packing didn't take long. Evelyn moved with purpose, each item weighed by memory and merit. Most of it didn't make the cut. She kept the silver anniversary pen, Richard's weathered Hemingway, bookmarked with a faded boarding pass from their trip to Boston, her grandmother's quilt, hand-stitched, sun-softened, a shoebox of letters, some angry, some adoring, from her students over the decades. The rest she labeled donate, estate sale, or trash. One box she simply wrote, forget in black Sharpie, and left on the curb without a backward glance. On the last night in the house, she sat on the floor of the empty living room with a cup of chamomile and the sound of cicadas sawing through the dark outside. It was too late in the season for them, but they sang anyway, like the world hadn't gotten the message to stop. She ran her hand over the floorboards one final time, remembering every creak that used to drive Richard mad, every sock she'd slipped on them, every spill she hadn't told anyone about. Then she stood. And she left. The lakeside condo smelled like fresh paint and lemon oil. The building was quiet, full of soft-spoken retirees who nodded in the hallway and minded their own grief. The water shimmered outside her window like an apology. Evelyn stood in the center of her new kitchen, surrounded by the only boxes that mattered. She opened one. Inside, the Hemingway, the pen, a fresh journal. She smiled, started unpacking. The digital dashboard glowed in the early morning dark, all soft blue light and efficient confirmation boxes. Evelyn clicked submit on the final form, account holder removal request, Oak County Utilities. Brandon's name vanished from the water bill. She sat back, sipping her coffee, watching the sun crawl across the lake outside her new condo. Peace didn't feel loud or triumphant. It felt like absence, the absence of chaos, of watching her own back. The quiet hum of the printer beside her announced the next step, confirmation letters all neatly stacked, one for each. Gas, electric, home insurance, trash and recycling, internet long canceled, and 2 credit card companies that had once mailed everything to Brandon for convenience. She faxed the court's notarized POA revocation to every institution Dana had flagged, then scanned the responses as they came in, swift and affirmative. Evelyn Hartman, sole authority, final say. The control she had given away in whispers, she had reclaimed in bold legal ink. Later that day, her phone buzzed. Derek Trujillo. Final transfer completes Friday. 48 hours to close. Keys stay with me. House is no longer your worry. She tapped back. Leave the box of keys with Dana. I'm done walking through that door. On Thursday evening, Evelyn stood one last time in the entryway of her old home. Empty now. Echoing. She ran a hand along the railing where Brandon once slid down in Spider-Man pajamas. She didn't cry. There wasn't anything left to wring from those walls. Dana met her at the porch with a clipboard, hair wind-blown, legal envelope in hand. Everything's finalized, she said. Deed recorded, utilities rerouted. Brandon's not just out. He's nowhere in it. Evelyn handed over the keys. Let the house forget me. They hugged briefly, a real hug this time. Then Evelyn walked down the front steps without looking back. Friday, 5:41 p.m. Brandon pulled into the driveway in a cloud of sour exhaust. He had a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, phone in hand, AirPods jammed in both ears. He was talking to someone, maybe a lawyer, maybe no one. He didn't see the new sign posted on the lawn. Private property, no trespassing, by order of new ownership. He marched to the front door, muttering something into his phone, then reached for the handle. It didn't turn. He tried again, rattled it, pushed harder. Nothing. He pounded on the door, called Evelyn's name, stepped back and stared at the lock, confused, like someone who'd woken up from a dream into a different life. Then he saw it. A sleek little circle just above the doorframe, the smart doorbell cam. It blinked red. Recording. He stepped forward and stared directly into it. 50 miles away, Evelyn sat on her condo balcony, a glass of Zinfandel in hand, watching the live feed on her tablet. Brandon's face filled the screen, mouth moving, forehead red, eyes wide with the rage of someone who couldn't comprehend their irrelevance. She muted the audio. She didn't need to hear it. She just watched. Until finally, Brandon stepped back from the door. He shouted something over his shoulder, then turned and walked off camera. A minute later, his car peeled out of the driveway like a tantrum on wheels. Evelyn turned off the feed, then raised her glass to the dusk settling over the lake. The first notice arrived by courier. Thick ivory cardstock in a navy legal envelope. Dana opened it in her office and scanned the top line twice before calling Evelyn. "He's suing you," she said, voice flat. Evelyn didn't even look up from her crossword. "For what now?" "Financial abuse of an elderly dependent," Dana replied. "He's claiming mental manipulation, coercion, and economic exile. He included a spreadsheet and 3 highlighted text messages." "Does he think I exiled myself from my own estate?" Evelyn asked dryly. "Apparently." There was a pause. Then Evelyn said, "Good. Let him." Dana's countersuit landed 3 days later, a brutal, well-documented defamation filing that cited Brandon's false statements in public court records, his attempted POA fraud, a summary of the recorded tea conversation, and a notarized copy of the original will Brandon had attempted to obscure. The motion included an attachment titled simply "Pattern of Malice." Brandon's attorney withdrew the initial complaint by end of day, but it was too late. By the following week, Brandon's employer, a sleek West Coast consulting firm that touted ethical excellence in its mission statement, had quietly updated their website. Brandon Hartman's bio disappeared. Evelyn didn't gloat. She just bookmarked the 404 page not found message for safekeeping. Then came Layla. She appeared in court via video, hair-pinned, voice calm, delivery devastating. "He controlled everything," she said. "Not just the money. Her schedule, her doctor's appointments, her mail. He even deleted voicemails before she could hear them." She held up a tablet and tapped to play a voicemail Evelyn had never received. "Don't worry about Mom. She doesn't need to know about the change in the trust. I've got it covered." Layla looked directly at the camera. "I didn't understand what it was until too late, but I understand now." Brandon didn't show up in person. His lawyer requested a continuance. The court declined. The local paper ran another headline. "Widow funds dream garden. Now faces son's legal wrath below it. A photo of Evelyn outside the lakeside condo, holding a stack of donation envelopes, smiling quietly beside a table of potted seedlings. The article quoted Dana, who said only, "Some roots grow deeper when you try to cut them out." Evelyn folded the paper neatly and slid it into the drawer beneath the coffee maker, not to frame it, to remember what not to forget. Later that month, she met Dana for lunch at a small cafe near the marina. The water sparkled like it had forgiven the land. Over grilled cheese and tomato soup, Evelyn handed Dana a sealed envelope. "Only open it if he ever shows up again," she said. Dana took it without question. "What's in it?" Evelyn's eyes didn't waver. Just enough. The fire came metaphorically, but thoroughly. Brandon's defamation case collapsed. The quiet investigation by the Office of Financial Crimes Enforcement picked up steam. One of his former partners leaked internal emails hinting at inappropriate asset redirection. He tried to pivot online, posting long-winded explanations, motivational quotes, even an apology video. No one shared it. Layla moved in with a friend and started training to become a paralegal. When a local station reached out for comment, she declined but offered one quote: "Sometimes people bury themselves. All you have to do is stop handing them shovels." Evelyn, meanwhile, planted rose bushes. On the edge of the quiet garden plot, she placed a stone plaque that read, "In memory of what's worth keeping." The garden wasn't finished, but it had begun. So had she. The quiet garden library smelled of cedar shelves and new paperbacks, a scent Evelyn had come to associate with forward motion. There were mismatched chairs, borrowed lamps, and one worn record player humming softly in the corner, spinning Sinatra like it never stopped. Tonight was poetry night. Evelyn had worried no one would come. By 6:15 p.m., every chair was filled. 2 local students read original pieces about grief and grit. A retired mechanic in a denim jacket recited Whitman by heart. And when it was Evelyn's turn, she didn't read something published. She read a page from her own journal. "Some things don't rot when they're buried," she said. "They root." No one clapped. No one needed to. It was the kind of silence that nodded. The mornings in the condo had rhythm now. Coffee by the lake, a short walk, a call with Dana. She no longer checked the doorbell feed, no longer woke at 3 a.m. expecting confrontation. On Thursdays, she taught journaling at the local recreation center. Her veterans, that's how she thought of them, were gruff, careful men and women who spoke little but wrote like floodgates when the right prompt landed. One had started writing about his mother's laugh. Another had drawn a full map of every memory he still had of his first deployment. Not the dates, but the smells. Evelyn read every word they let her. She never corrected grammar, only circled truths. That spring she boxed up Richard's old books, most to donate, a few to lend. But one she placed in a canvas bag and carried to the library by hand. It was a signed first edition of The Old Man and the Sea, tucked inside a plastic sleeve, wrapped in tissue. Richard had found it at a garage sale 30 years ago and nearly cried from disbelief. He'd never let it out of the house. Evelyn placed it in the quiet garden library's display case. A brass plate was already affixed beneath the glass. "Donated in honor of the only man who let me speak before he corrected me. R.H." She didn't cry. She just watched as 2 teenagers leaned close to the case, mouths shaped in small wows. Dana arrived on a breezy Sunday with a bottle of elderflower tonic and a red folder. "All legal issues are closed," she said, setting the folder down on the patio table. "No open filings, no pending claims, no contestable assets. It's all yours now." Evelyn poured 2 glasses. "Not bad," Dana added, raising hers. For a woman they thought needed a guardian. They clinked glasses. Below them the lake mirrored the sky. Not perfectly, but with enough shimmer to feel true. Dana leaned back in her chair. "You really think he's gone?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She watched a single duck drift across the water, lazy and unbothered. "He might come back," she said finally. "But it won't matter. He doesn't know who I am anymore, and I don't owe him the reminder." Dana nodded once. "Fair." They sat in easy quiet for another hour. Then Dana hugged her, a long, steady press of palm to shoulder, and left. That night, Evelyn opened her journal. She didn't start on a new page. She flipped back to the first, the one where she'd once written, "Grief is a thief that doesn't wear gloves." Below it, she added, "But sometimes it leaves fingerprints that help you build the case." Then she turned to the next blank page and wrote only, "Today was enough." She closed the journal, set down the pen. Outside, the spring air curled in through the window, smelling faintly of pine and pond. Evelyn reached over, turned on the record player. Sinatra's voice spilled out like an old friend. "The best is yet to come. And won't it be fine?" She let it play. She didn't rush the ending. The envelope was cream-colored and thick, hand-delivered, no return address. But Evelyn recognized the slant of the handwriting instantly. She hadn't seen it in cursive since Brandon was 10, when his second-grade teacher insisted on thank-you notes after field trips. Inside, a single sheet, written with shaky precision. "Mom, I know you done. I'd owe me anything. I know I broke more than I built, but I need one last conversation. Just the two of us. No lawyers, no Dana. I'm not asking for money or land or legacy. Just an hour. For closure. Please. Brandon." No threats, no manipulation, just the smallest thread of a question left dangling. Evelyn folded the letter back in half, creased it cleanly, and set it beside her mug. She didn't react, didn't frown, didn't smile. She simply picked up her journal and wrote, "Closure doesn't require conversation." She made tea, opened the back door, let the morning sun fall across the tiles like a warm verdict. That afternoon, Dana arrived with a folder and an email printout. "The fund's ready," she said. "You can name the recipient and amount whenever you're ready. The org vetted clean, trauma-informed recovery shelter, mostly for women leaving financial abuse situations." Evelyn nodded slowly. "And the money?" "Comes from what would have gone to Brandon. Post-tax remainder, liquidated assets. His name never touched the account." She sat down at the dining table. The window overlooked the garden where green shoots had begun to stretch upward, soft but stubborn. Evelyn opened the folder. A single line waited for a signature. Just beneath it, donation authorization, Quiet Garden Foundation to Willow House Recovery, St. Louis, Missouri. Dana reached for the ballpoint. "No," Evelyn said softly, "not that one." She stood, crossed the room, and opened the drawer by the bookshelf. From inside, she withdrew the silver pen, the one Richard had given her for their 25th anniversary. It was cool in her hand, weighted like memory. She clicked it once, then signed. The ink glided across the page, fluid and absolute. When she finished, she clicked the pen closed, held it for a moment, then walked over to the glass display cabinet where the Hemingway had been placed weeks ago. On the shelf just below it sat a new velvet-lined box, deep blue with a brass plate on the lid. She opened it. Nestled inside, a satin groove shaped for something precise. Evelyn placed the pen gently inside, closed the lid. The plate read, "Used with purpose." At sunset, Evelyn walked to the postbox at the end of the condo lane. Inside the return envelope from Brandon's letter, she placed a single card. No reply, no signature. Just one sentence handwritten in her own steady hand. "You had your closure the moment I walked away." She sealed it, slipped it into the outgoing mail, walked home without looking back. Back inside, the record player clicked softly as it reached the end of a side. She flipped it, let it spin again. Then she lit a candle, not for memory, not for grief, just because she liked the light. As the wax warmed and the room took on the golden hush of a home that had decided who belonged in it, Evelyn opened her journal one last time that evening. She didn't write a summary, no grand reflection, just a new line. Some endings don't burn, they bloom. She closed the book. The pen was no longer on her desk, and she didn't need it, not anymore.